So, welcome to Cloud Certification Series. This is 3.2 section, and we are going to talk about scaling in this scenario. First, what are we going to? The objective of this section is to understand the concepts of scaling and how it is applied in the cloud application, and designing a cloud application, and what is vertical scaling, horizontal scaling, and understand how you can manually scale applications in Bluemix as well as automatically scale applications in Bluemix. So by the end of the session, we expect the developers to understand these concepts. This will be provided with a lab. This is a presentation, and we will have a lab or a demo that you can, and that will walk you through a step-by-step procedure on how to do the same thing in Bluemix. So what is scaling? There are a lot of people talking about a huge advantage of elasticity and scaling. What it means? What is scaling actually? What cloud gives you on a normal way is cloud empowers you with maximum computing resources that can meet your load requirements, and that's what is called scaling. The capacity that can be altered both manually, either by executing a command or through a command line interface or through a web interface or programmatically, that increases your capacity automatically by either a software is called scaling. The cloud empowers you with all those capabilities. Mainly, the ability to manually adjust the capacity is huge advantage over traditional computing in the cloud. But the real power of scaling of cloud lies in dynamic scaling, which is also called auto scale or automatic scaling. And the another key core objective of cloud computing is inherent elasticity. That is the ability to consume more or less resources on demand and through a pay-per-use model. Elasticity is a very critical differentiator for cloud computing, and also all the big companies like IBM and Amazon have even named their IaaS offerings for Elastic Cloud. SoftLayer is one of the major offerings from IBM that supports all these auto-scaling, and Bluemix, from a platform as a service perspective, has a auto-scaling services that helps people do scaling automatically based on the resources that are used by an application. Now, what are the types of scaling that are available? There are two types of scaling. If you're a visual kind of a person, you might be personally able to see. Let's see, if you're looking at the screen, if we add technology towards what is vertical scaling, it's often called as scaling up. So the scaling up, what is scaling up? Vertical scaling, it's basically a mechanism to resize your server with no charge or no code. It's the ability to increase the capacity of the existing hardware that you already have or software by adding resources. It's limited by the fact that you can only get as big as the size of the server. And if you see the server on the diagram that shows on the left-hand side where an app uses 2 CPUs and 2 RAMs, let's say there is a server configured on your data center or on cloud. There is a maximum capacity that a server can be configured to the capacity available on the server. So your application can spin any number of CPUs or RAMs based on the load, but there is a limitation. That is vertical scaling if you are conceptually looking at what is vertical. The other type of scaling is called horizontal scaling, and what horizontal scaling does is it gives the ability to scale wider and to deal with the traffic. It is the ability to connect multiple hardware and software entities such as servers so that they can work as a single logical unit. This kind of scaling cannot be implemented at a single moment notice, but whereas in cloud, if you're looking at it, your auto-scaling service that can be then that automatically can increase or decrease the horizontal scaling based on the configuration of the auto scaling service available in Bluemix or on a cloud. So this is also called scaling out. If you're looking at the diagram, there is a before and after part of it. Before, you see an application using 2 CPUs and 2 RAMs, and let's say the volume of the application increases, it spins off multiple nodes of the application, and it can have multiple application instances running, and the load balancer will be automatically configured and will route the resource request based on the volume. This can be done automatically, as I said, by the auto scaling service in Bluemix. Once you configure it, there are certain policy parameters which I'm going to talk about in the next slide that helps to do this auto scaling. So steps to manually scale applications in Bluemix. Basically, this is there are 2 types of scaling, as we just talked about, horizontal and vertical. If you want to manually scale applications in Bluemix, the first thing is let's talk about vertical scaling. What you can do is increase your RAM for your application by increasing the quota that is available, memory quota that is shown on the screen, by clicking on the runtime that your application is using, and that increases the capacity of your application to handle resources that are available, the memory resources that are available. That is called vertical scaling, that can be manually scaled there. So if you're talking about horizontal scaling in Bluemix and how that can be done manually, you can just go and increase the number of instances based on the load. And what happens is, if there is a if there is a huge amount of transaction volume that is being routed to the application, the number of instances and the volume will be handled by the maximum number of instances that are shown, that are configured manually on the runtime parameters. So this is horizontal scaling, where you can do both horizontal and vertical manually in Bluemix PaaS. So if you're going to the next screen, how do you auto scale your application in Bluemix? So what do you mean by auto scaling? Let's say that in the morning, your application receives a large amount of requests, and your CPU, your memory grows by, or your throughput grows by a certain amount of certain amounts of consumption. You could configure your application with this service where this service takes care of your application, either to increase a number of instances or decrease a number of instances based on the volume or the transaction loads that are happening to the application. So there is a policy that will be tied in this auto scaling service configuration, which you're seeing on the screen. Here, the one example is the policy will consist of a rule that you need to define and configure in this auto scaling services. So when your application is tied to this auto scaling service in Bluemix, or configured with this auto scaling service in Bluemix, as an agent that is installed onto the runtime of an application, where this auto scaling service would be monitoring all the parameters based on the rule that has been defined in the auto scaling policy. In this example, we are creating a Java heap policy, which tells me that the minimum number of instances that an application needs to have is 1, and increase it to 2 if a rule gets triggered. What is a rule? A rule is a parameter, is a setting that is being configured in this policy. In this configuration, we are talking about JVM heap. If your application uses JVM heap more than 50%, I want to increase the application instance by 1. And if I'm going to reduce if the application doesn't consume more than 20% of the heap, decrease the instance by 1. So what does that mean? And this means is, let's say I have an application that is heavily used based on the JVM heap. If the usage goes beyond 50%, I will increase one more instance, add one more instance to my app. And if it goes below 20%, I will decrease one instance and be happy with the single instance that is available. So this is what an auto-scaling service is, and then you can configure any number of instances based on the rule that you're defining and based on the type of rule that you're defining, like the metric type you can define on your own. So in the next slide, you can clearly see I had defined a metric of 30 and 50. So you can see if my usage went beyond 50%, it added one more instance, and if it went below the 20 or 30%, it decreased to one instance. So this is how your metrics would be looking like when your application hits these zones, and this is a diagrammatic view that is automatically provided by this auto-scaling service in Bluemix. Similarly, here is an example that shows you when an instance is added, when an instance is removed. I think in both these cases, in here, they're adding an instance, memory usage is exceeding 50% in both these cases, if you're looking at it, and we added instance number 3, and here, before that, we added instance number 2 at 10:15. So the volume of the transactions or the load on that for the application increased at 10:15, so above 50%. So it added one instance later. At 10:19, it added one more instance because it still is in the same stage of handling the volume. That is how your auto-scaling helps your application. And with that, I conclude the topic. So you please review the lab and the demo that is available for the certification course. Here are a few of the bookmarks that you can go through for looking at the availability of how a Bluemix application can be configured to use auto-scaling either manually or automatically. Thank you.